Good evening, everybody. I'm sorry I can't be with you tonight. I'm in the Red Sea, a place I know that Martin loved. But I wanted to say something tonight because Martin is a dear person to all of us and also a very important part of BSoUP's history. He was an honorary life member of BSoUP, but also, I think, one of our most important members ever in terms of his influence on the broader underwater photography community. Martin was also the epitome of the BSoUP ethos, that of innovating and sharing knowledge. And I'm very happy that we now have the Martin Edge Lecture permanently on the calendar to remember this. And finally, he was also definitely BSoUP's most effective unofficial recruitment officer, as most of the membership over the past 30 years will be able to attest. Anyway, Martin, for more than a quarter of a century and through 5 editions of the book, and for almost 40 years through his workshops and one-to-one courses, Martin has helped the world take better underwater photographs. Almost all of you will have a well-thumbed edition of Martin's book, The Underwater Photographer, and would have benefited from his insight. Indeed, Martin's ideas and explanations have become so much a part of underwater photography that they're simply repeated in almost every article written on the topic as simply the way it's done. Those of us fortunate enough to be able to call Martin a friend were never surprised. He was a teaching sensation. The man was addicted to it, a natural-born coach, equally able to help both absolute beginners and the most celebrated names in the business. Allied to this, Martin was armed with the inquiring, analytical mind of a police detective. Martin had the gift for asking searching questions and was disarmingly talented at making you talk about your motives, even if you'd never properly considered them yourself. The third piece of the puzzle of Martin's success was his modesty. The underwater photography holds Martin in the highest esteem, yet he remained genuinely humble about his fabulous pictures and his massive contribution. But this also meant that rather than considering all his work perfect, he was always looking to improve. And in 1983, all of this arrived at BSoUP, and I'll continue now in his words. I knew of BSoUP from the UK dive magazines and followed all the current photo icons of that era. I was desperate to attend a meeting, so I contacted the secretary, Brian Pitkin. All the famous names were in attendance. I recognised their faces from their photographic achievements in the magazines. Warren Williams, Colin Doeg, Mike Valentine, Peter Rowlands and all. If I think back, it was a daunting experience rubbing shoulders with my heroes. But we were made to feel very welcome. My everlasting memory of that first visit was the winning image of Focus On, taken by Georgette Daumer. Light under the pier, taken in the Red Sea. I was completely overwhelmed by the impact of this image and totally hooked, or hooked as Martin would say, determined and motivated to learn how these shots were taken. Over the years, the BSoUP gods were so very generous with their information, but it was up to us to ask the right questions. We so admired the work of Peter Rowlands, Peter Scoons, Warren Williams, that any opportunity to ask these guys questions was a bonus. I began to realise how little I really knew, but what did sink in was the fact that photography underwater was less to do with f-stops and shutter speeds, but much more about light and opportunities. I waited in line to ask Peter Scoons a question, and he went on to explain the notion of finding great light and then looking for something, anything to put into that light. These answers opened our hearts and minds into how the very best shooters approach their own photography. Today's new underwater photographers are taught very early on not to simply take photos on a scuba dive, but to dive for their images. We're encouraged to take more shots of less subjects, to seek out great light if you want it in your pictures, to work the opportunities. These approaches were what all those leading BSoUP shooters were doing when Martin started out. But for many, these were things they did naturally or through experience and never really thought to talk about it. Martin took the time to extract the information and then found the words to be able to teach that knowledge and more to the rest of the community. Many of the key lessons of the underwater photography mindset started exactly here. Personally, I'll always treasure the quality time we spent together, discussing pictures, dissecting techniques, and thrilling in amazing underwater imagery when judging contests. And I'll always smile when I remember listening to the fabulous stories he told over a beer at the end of those long judging days, which I'm not going to repeat those stories here. Martin would always encourage me with my shooting, right to the end. His closing advice: go and play. Set dives aside to be wild, free and silly. So much of what I have found that works has come from mad ideas. And we all know he's up there now, coaching the likes of Jacques Cousteau and Anzas, as he would call him, on how to get better shots themselves. Rest in peace, mate. We're going to miss you.